as I do think butt heads. But moving on to the ban phases here, we have, of course, the double warrior ban. We saw from FroStee when he was up against Blitzchung yesterday. Obviously, Blitzchung did not bring the warrior, so FroStee could not ban it away. Instead, I believe he went with the Demon Hunter ban. But taking a slightly closer look at FroStee's lineup, I think his thought process was more to try and have techs against the Demon Hunter in particular, and then ban away the warrior. We're seeing a Frozen Shadow Weaver in his own Demon Hunter list to give him a little bit of advantage in that matchup, and 2 Frozen Shadow Weavers in the Rogue to give him a little bit of a leg up in the Demon Hunter matchup, which is traditionally one that you're kind of dying a little bit too quickly on, and the freeze can stop the weapon hits for a while. So even though FroStee took a loss yesterday, this feels much more like the strategy he was preparing for with his lineup.
That's a very good point. I would say that the techs extend all the way even into his zoo, but that's not the topic for right now because we're starting off with a good old-fashioned Demon Hunter mirror. Both of these players, with the Satyr Overseer in the opening, but FroStee may be more incentivized to keep it because he's already got the Twin Slice.
Yeah, both players as well, looking at the deck lists, are running the lighter version without Priestess of Fury and the Raging Bell Screamers. Staz, however, we were talking about the Frozen Shadow Weavers. He's got 2 of them in his deck as opposed to FroStee's 1, so arguably even more teched for the mirror. So I think if Staz can find any kind of a decent starting hand, which he has, he's in a very good spot here.
Indeed. I think it is just a 1-card difference in these 2 lists. Staz with the 2 Shadow Weavers, 1 Spectral Sight, and FroStee vice versa.
Yeah.
But for Staz, even though he's going second, which you tend to feel a little bit disadvantaged going second in this matchup because FroStee didn't have a 1-drop and Staz has got premium 1-drops, could get pretty dicey for FroStee. He does have that Chaos Strike to answer a Battle Fiend, though.
Tough choice here for Staz, where he could go for Battle Fiend, Coin, Crimson Sigil Runner, draws a card, and arguably sets up for Frenzied Fellwing very well on the following turn. The big punish to that, however, is Umberwing from FroStee. If he's able to get that down and attack into the Crimson Sigil Runner, it means Staz would be unable to play the Frenzied Fellwing on the following turn, even with the hero power. And so I think that this is a slightly more temperate approach, but does, on average, work out better for Staz.
Sorry, if the Sigil Runner goes face on that turn and then he gets the hero power, he would be able to play the Fellwing.
Right, but if Umberwing comes down, then it would take out the Crimson Sigil Runner preemptively.
But then he'd have the Battle Fiend if you coin out both. It's either 1 minion deals 2 damage or the other, I think. But that's not to say that not coining them both out is wrong. I can definitely see merits for both. Namely, I think the Satyr Overseer saving coin for that seems really strong, especially since he's drawn this Twin Slice off the top, allows Staz a very strong push onto the board right now.
Well, I think it was just that if it's just the Battle Fiend as a 1-2 left over, then Hero Power plus Battle Fiend on 2 is only 3 damage, which doesn't allow the Frenzied Fellwing down.
Yes, it does if it all goes face. Because he has 2 mana. Wait.
Time grows short.
Sorry, I don't know if we're following each other here.
I think we might be on, crossing paths here, but either way, the important thing is that for Staz, he can get down the Satyr Overseer with the Twin Slice coming down. Now this, however, does very nicely set up the Frenzied Fellwing. And even if that fails, he's still got the Crimson Sigil Runner. He is just going to start absolutely dominating the board unless FroStee can find some pretty powerful comeback tools.
Yeah, he already has, say, this Chaos Strike to deal with the Satyr Overseer, but it seems really inefficient to float mana. And he'd love to be able to play his own Overseer, but having used already 1/2 of the Twin Slice would allow him to deal with the other one. It's really awkward here.
It's very, very indeed. I guess if you go for the Frozen Shadow Weaver to face, there's few ways that Demon Hunter can get damage without extra damage effects without their hero being able to attack. It was pretty much just I-Beam. And it would also mean, of course, that the Satyr Overseer is unable to get an extra 2/2 on the following turn.
I think that's actually pretty smart.
Yeah, I liked that play a lot.
Freezing the Overseer might be the reflex play if you're playing the Frozen Shadow Weaver, but then that allows Staz a very easy clear onto it with his own hero power in the 2/2, which is immediately regenerated.
Yeah.
But instead, FroStee says, He is going to clear the Satyr Overseer. I don't hate that either.
As it just so happens, if FroStee had gone for that line of play, he would have been hit with the Crimson Sigil Runner, everything face, Frenzied Fellwing, and then 1 mana Eye Beam to take out the Shadow Weaver. So he would have been in a dreadful position if he had gone with that line. I'm just not sure if, on average, it was maybe the best way to try and fight back with a big Satyr Overseer next turn.
And for Staz, already interesting. He's got these 2 draw effects, but of course, the Crimson Sigil Runner would lock in the Spectral Sight Outcast if he plays that first. So he might be incentivized to play the Spectral Sight first, but that is slow. It's expending a lot of mana. And in most outcomes, Staz would end up just developing the Sigil Runner on the backswing. Not really the strongest push onto the board.
Yeah, the alternative line is to try and get Spectral Sight on the left-hand side by going Crimson Sigil Runner, Hero Power Second Slice, launch everything face, free Fellwing for 0 mana, and then the Eye Beam can be used to take out the 3-2 as well.
I like the sound of that.
Okay, good.
Staz instead going to preserve his 2-2 here and says that with this amount of mana, you can still develop a 2-2 and then save the Eye Beam, so I don't hate this either.
Okay. Fair enough, yeah. Still sets up for a very powerful Frenzied Fellwing, in all likelihood next turn. Everything really is just that little bit off of being perfect. Satyr Overseer, it may just have to come down in order to try and equalize the board on the following side.
It definitely looks like the best usage of mana, but unfortunate for FroStee that it just lines up so poorly against what Staz has.
Yeah.
Whew. That can allow Staz to get down a free Fellwing this turn if he wants, and clear off the Overseer with one of the other 2-2s. There's also Eye Beam options.
A little bit awkward.
I don't know, I quite like the look of Kane and one of the 2-2s to the face, lay down the Fellwing, the other 2-2 trades into the 4-2.
You don't want to go all face, and then you get to Eye Beam the Overseer and play Spectral Sight on the same turn, which means you're more likely to find one of your powerful 5-drops, like the Warglaives in particular.
Yeah, because it's going into turn 5, I see your point about the draw, but I also just really like the look of the board development here. Being the first to play Kane and still stay ahead on board, I think...
It's a big deal. Yeah. It's much more secure against an opposing Warglaives here, because if FroStee wants to trade the 2-2 and then Warglaives down the 3 minions, Staz is pretty happy with that.
It's true. The downside, I suppose, of Staz's play is that if FroStee ends the turn with no minions on board, which is very possible if Warglaives comes down, then suddenly the Eye Beam is stuck in hand and maybe the Spectral Sight gets stuck in the middle.
Demons.
So are we looking at something like Shadow Weaver plus this Sightless Watcher?
Yeah, I imagine trying to find Skull of Gul'dan for the top, which he does find. He can preload that to play on the following turn, unless he feels like that's too slow and he needs to go for Metamorphosis. But I think overall, I am fully on board with his decision to go for the Skull of Gul'dan here. He needs something fairly impressive to swing things.
Wow, what a draw for Staz, though. Insane.
Yeah, this is clearly the correct play for Staz if he knows he's going to draw Warglaives anyway.
Okay, so all is not lost because we know FroStee's about to draw his Skull. Anything like his own Eye Beams could maybe give him a little bit more time to swing this board. But suddenly, he's so close to dying, and Staz has still got this Kane ready to attack next turn. I want to see the face hit.
I just think you go face here. You're so close to closing out the game. It's not even just because you could get another Warglaives, it's just because you could draw lethal, I think, on the following turn.
Demons.
I think for Staz, what he needs to consider is is there any minion that I would rather swing this Warglaze into? So something like, say, if there's a crazy Altruist clear. But even then, he's got the I-Beam, so I really like the face hit.
Yeah, it's really just if exactly Skull of Gul'dan comes down into exactly a board of small minions. And I think even if that happens, he can still just happily launch everything towards the face and close things out very consistently. As we see there, FroStee just whiffing on any of the reactive answers. Staz ahead right from the get-go, just closes things out in the expected fashion. FroStee just didn't have the fluid Demon Hunter hand that you're looking for, and instead was left with clunky minions.
Fluid is definitely a great way of describing Demon Hunter, because when it comes together, it just seems so perfect. Like, you spend every last bit of your mana, definitely made more consistent by the fact that the Demon Hunter hero power is unique, the only one at 1 mana, and makes everything weave together so much more cleanly. And then you have cards like Twin Slice that activate so many synergies without having to think of a mana cost at all. So Demon Hunter mana expenditure is definitely its greatest strength, but when you don't get that, suddenly the whole game plan turns on its head.
And that was such a perfect example for me of how I feel about Staz. I think I disagreed with quite a few of his plays, but then looking back on it, a lot of his plays may have just won him the game. There was nothing wrong with the plays he was making. It's just a slight difference of playstyle, I think, between me and him. And, I think you were in agreement with most of his plays anyway,
Yes.
which means, all things considered, he's probably right.
So who's the butthead now, Dara?
I am the butthead, which is why I need to have a moment to recuperate and go to a break. I have no idea how I'm going to make these two disparate parts work together into throwing to a break, but that's what's happening here. We're going to a break, and we'll be right back with FroStee versus Staz after this. You're watching Hearthstone. You're watching Hearthstone Grandmasters here for the Asia Pacific region, and we are halfway through our match between Staz and FroStee. A very one-sided match for the Demon Hunter mirror there in favor of Staz there, which is to be unexpected, I think, or to be expected given his slightly heavier tech list, and also just because he drew the better cards at the start of the game. But now, Gia, we are left, of course, without the Demon Hunter, which means it is a slightly different matchup here, given the fourth deck that we keep seeing to add spice for each of these players.
Good that you bring that up, because it will be the fourth deck for both of these players queued up next. The Warlock for FroStee and the Hunter for Staz. And of our testing, we did a lot of, say, Zoo versus Demon Hunter and Face Hunter versus Demon Hunter, but not quite those two decks up against each other. So now I've got to think about whether the Face Hunter's explosive trap can actually help it as much in that matchup versus Zoo.
I'd have to imagine it's not quite so obvious up against the Demon Hunter, because remember, a lot of the time with Zoo nowadays, it's just vomiting all your one-drops onto the board and hoping that you can take value trades and go for the win, finish it off with Doomguard. This functions ideally a lot more like a combo deck.
I do miss
with
Doomguard.
mini combos, where you're getting the Scrap Imp and the Hand of Gul'dan discarded to draw your entire deck.
And you did mention the Scrap Imp, but another powerhouse card for at least the aggressive matchups is that Magic Carpet could really help FroStee take back the board, because as it stands, if Zoo likes to play Scrap Imp early, they're kind of conceding that early board to the opposing deck. So now Staz here, with the option to keep Toxic Reinforcements, always seems like a strong card to get down early, but I wonder how much value he will give to the Explosive Trap. As we were saying against Demon Hunter, it's probably just a straight up keep and not Phase Stalker, because you want it down as early as possible.
My instinct is definitely to say that you just don't look for it that heavily in the mulligan. With the fact that you have Beaming Sidekick to buff up the health, you have Scrap Imp to buff up the health, you're most of the time going to be looking to go for a huge Magic Carpet turn anyway.
Right.
I would rather just look for maybe even Toxic Reinforcements is kind of the dream, because you can start getting that damage to face. They're probably going to have to life tap along the way, and you could just go for the burst plan. I really like this mulligan from Staz.
Yeah, I definitely like the reasoning as well. And he's rewarded with a powerful play on turn 2 if he wants it. But this is always kind of the question to ask yourself when playing as Face Hunter, that you got your Toxic Reinforcements down. Don't you want a hero power every turn? I think, though, that in this particular situation, the Phase Stalker coming down might not necessarily be answered right away.
Yeah, especially if we see Coin Scrap Imp on one, there would be effectively zero answers in the deck, unless he wants to throw down a Soulfire, which for Staz, you'd be very happy to see.
Although it's worth noting that Frosty's Zoo list is a little bit out of the ordinary. We see this Bluegill Warrior included there on top of the Stone Tusk scores, even more heavy on the charge minions. And he's also got Abusive Sergeant to help him maybe trade up better against some of the other minions. But he does go for the Scrap Imp. We're not surprised to see that, because Zoo really is just trying for that mid-game push game plan rather than locking down the early board. So now Staz can develop the Phase Stalker for free if he wants.
Yeah, the more I think about it, the more I like developing minions here, because as soon as Zoo starts playing out their buffed up minions, you are never going to win back board for the entirety of the game. Even with an explosive trap down, the only game plan becomes damage to face, which is why I love getting this down, not even for the secrets so much, just for the attacks to face. This equals more damage, I feel like, over the long run.
I would agree, but I do think he'll want to be pressing hero power next turn, because it's got the triple benefit, the 2 to face, obviously the most important one, and then advancing the quest, and of course getting down that explosive trap. But FroStee's picked up this Soulfire now, so if he feels like it, he can get rid of the Face Stalker, but that's discarding a minion that he so sorely wants to buff. And it's off curve.
This means that FroStee's buffs next turn are going to be significantly weaker than if he just tapped there. I'm pretty far convinced that was even the right play.
I couldn't tell you. It feels strong here, because we can see Staz's hand particularly, which is just, he really wants to get that hero power benefit and then develop another thing.
But now the danger for me is that and maybe I'm underestimating what even these few buffs can do. But my fear is that FroStee will be able, may just fall behind on board. He won't be able to get quite enough buffs early on in order to absolutely lock down the trades every turn.
Well, I don't think he'll fall behind on board here. These are, what, a 3-4 and a 4-3, along with the 3-3. My problem with that was, does that give him enough damage to push back for lethal before Staz can kill him? And it's so funny we're talking about lethals when the players are at 27 and 30, but you guys just wait. Face Hunter can do some magic, some really quick subtraction.
Even this one damage that FroStee is allowing to go face could be the difference maker for Staz. Every point matters.
But does it go face? Staz can set up the explosive trap here if he wants to. And if you send the board to the face, you're pretty much conceding that it's going to die to a rush from hand, and FroStee can use all of the rest of his damage to go face.
I wonder.
Okay.
The
My
other
initial thinking was just that you go Cobalt Sand Trooper, Hero Power, and push it all face.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at a halfway play now, something like Kobold, Hero Power, and trade the board. Because it seems like Staz probably won't have a good way of damaging the Scrap Imp after this turn. But
well, maybe
if he so needs to, he can use Arcane Shot.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe this plays into what you were thinking of. Now that FroStee doesn't have so many buffed minions, his clock on the other side is a little bit slower. He won't be able to deliver lethal so quickly. So Staz doesn't care so much about a 3-3 sticking on the board. It's going to have to start trading at some point anyway.
That's fair, but look at this top deck from FroStee.
Yeah, that's insane.
Nightshade is a 7/7 that draws him 3 cards. Insane.
And it has Rush to boot. Why not?
Mm-hmm. It's gotta be the play.
Yeah, I like it a lot. It still just stops any damage from going face, and very likely will for the entire remainder of the game.
Mm-hmm. Staz can get his quest completion next turn. There will be 7 hitting him. Or maybe not necessarily.
Are you thinking that he should go double Arcane Shot on the Nightshade Matron and Explosive Trap?
Maybe not that extreme. I'm looking at some type of Explosive Trap setup. It might have to happen over 2 turns.
Okay.
But I do think he needs to get this quest online ASAP.
Well, I was looking at Eaglehorn Bow face, Hero Power face as well. That may, however, like you said, be a bit too much pressure on the other side.
Well, given that the best ways he has of clearing still involves taking 7 damage, I do think he can just go face this turn and go for the explosive setup on the following turn. It's heavily punished by this beaming sidekick we can see from FroStee, but other than that, I don't think Zoo has a way of buffing minions that are already on board. And the Leopard Gnomes also help soften up the board if FroStee doesn't trade them.
Whole plethora of 1-drops, however, of course, mean that, well, just looking at it at face value, the Fiendish Servant, double beaming sidekick cleans up all of the 1/1s, and FroStee wouldn't even have to play the Flame Imp in order to get all this damage to face.
Right? I don't think he's ever going to play this Flame Imp. It's too scary.
No, yeah.
I think he might be looking at Evil Genius, say, this turn, to try and find a Taunt Lackey or something like that. Because as it stands to me, I feel like the beaming sidekick, the added health doesn't seem extremely relevant right now while he hasn't seen an explosive trap. Maybe 1 sidekick, 1 Lackey.
This is smart. Likely gets him 5 extra damage on this turn.
Oh, the Taunt Lackey is huge!
Taunt Lackey is huge.
Yeah.
5 damage on the wrong target is very bad, though.
Indeed.
Hey, I got you, friend.
It kind of evens out because that gives Staz more time, but it also gives FroStee more time because Staz can't deal this 3 face. Right. This is very intricate. Definitely the explosive has to come down this turn. Potentially stops the 7-2. I don't think Staz is ever thinking about the second beaming in this position. It's so unlikely that it's in hand.
We can clearly see that if he wants to survive, he has to Arcane Shot the evil genius in order to guarantee that the explosive trap does go off, even through the beaming sidekick, and then he would survive at exactly 1 health. But I agree. I think the correct play, and the play that he will end up making, is just playing the explosive trap, hoping it gets there, and then setting up for the extra damage next turn with the hero power to close things out.
He could potentially instead soften up the Nightshade, because as it stands, even through an explosive trap, FroStee has 15 damage, so it's just 1 from hand for lethal.
Right, but if you break down the numbers here, the explosive trap does 2, and then double Arcane Shot hero power closes the game.
It does, but so do certain top decks from Staz.
True.
So the question is whether Staz thinks it's more likely that FroStee has 1 extra damage in hand. This is already negating the possibility of beaming sidekick from Staz's perspective. Or whether it's more likely that Staz draws a way to get lethal without the arcane shots. It's very intricate. He would need exactly, I think, kill command. So that is ultimately the answer, but we saw that as far back as a while ago, FroStee had the win.
Yep. There was only one play, or, you know, the arcane shot had to be expended there in order for Staz to be able to stay alive. But I think, in my opinion, he still made the best play. This basically meant that only beaming sidekick would be able to, on the spot, win FroStee the game, or I suppose a little bit of extra damage off of a buff card, of which there are few in the deck.
Yeah, not even just buff cards, but Stone Tusk Boars, Bluegill Warriors, that's in the list for FroStee. That's why I was thinking of going for the arcane shots. But again, it involved a lot of odds there that are pretty much impossible to come up with the hard numbers off the top of your head. I think Staz did the best he could there, but unfortunately that Face Hunter has fallen.
Yeah, there was a lot of different lines he could have gone for there, but the main thing that sets up the course of the entire game in these aggro matchups is the mulligan, and you and I can agree. Mulligan first couple of turns, I think Staz played very well. He knew what he was going for by getting rid of the explosive trap, and instead trying to get the side quest online as quick as possible, which we may get to see again, as of course the Hunter is now still active up against the Rogue and the Demon Hunter left for FroStee. It does just look like, again, Gia, we may be leading up to a couple of Rogues left over at the end.
I think that this Face Hunter is well positioned against both of FroStee's remaining decks. We do see that in other regions, the Demon Hunters are kind of evolving and adding beaming sidekicks of their own, and that variant possibly can completely counter Explosive Trap, as we saw the interaction with Zoo a while ago. But as of now, Demon Hunters are playing a lot of minions that can't go face if there's a secret online. And that will be exactly the matchup we're running up into.
That's right, Demon Hunter on Hunter. We played this matchup a few times in the old practice testing. I was on the Demon Hunter, and time again, I found myself saying, oh, you know, surely this time I can just go all in, and the only answer the Hunter has is Explosive Trap. And time and time again, I was met with an Explosive Trap to the face and lost again.
And that point is why I would actually advocate for hard mulliganing for it. We see Staz here keeping 2 very good cards on curve, in theory, which are Toxic Reinforcements and Scavenger's Ingenuity. But I wonder if, on average, that actually puts him so far behind the early game from Demon Hunter. To be fair, though, the Scavenger's Ingenuity has a 50% chance of drawing him Phase Stalker, which could then draw out Explosive Trap later.
Very good point. And he's still, of course, getting in a lot of damage. The Demon Hunter has to get an above-average early game draw, I feel like, to put a quick enough of a clock that it can outlast all this burst damage from the Face Hunter.
Fair enough. Staz here, I'd be surprised to see anything but the Ingenuity, because I do think it's very important to get that Phase Stalker as soon as possible. Maybe the downside is drawing something like Boar, and I can't believe I'm saying that a 1-mana 4/4 charge is not good enough, but we're talking Demon Hunter here. At best, it trades with 1 minion, and that then gets taken down by FroStee's weapons.
And we were talking about needing to get an above-average draw here in terms of the aggressive potential in the early game. FroStee has not found that. He has no minion development available whatsoever.
But off of this Chaos Strike, he could coin the Sigil Runner if he wants, which honestly feels really bad because his curve is so top end that he'd love to, say, coin Glavebound on turn 4 with his Twin Slice. But he's saying he needs to get online right now, find some way to answer what could be a big beast coming down next turn.
And he is undeniably rewarded with this. The downside is still there. He cannot go coin Glavebound Adept with the Twin Slice on turn 4. But now, just the 4/3 body of the Veiled Shadow Weaver is so important.
Staz here. Definitely think that Face Talker is on the menu, but is he going to pair the Leper Gnome with it, or possibly the Arcane Shot on the 2/2 protect the Face Talker? That's what I'm looking at. But if Raven is listening in right now, I'm sure he'd be cursing me for directing any of this burst damage anywhere other than the face.
I'm seeing so many different lines here, Gia. We could... Staz could hold on to the Face Stalker entirely and try to go for it next turn, maybe set up an Eagle Horn bow here. But that, of course, steps over the hero power, which is a pretty big deal to start getting down at this point, given that he hasn't pressed it once.
Right. You know what? I really like the sound of that. Because we were talking about this. Explosive Trap negates every minion development on board. So Staz says, let me take this 4, sure. Next turn, the whole board either gets cleared by FroStee having to expend an attack, or the Face Stalker just deals with the minions. It's win-win.
At first glance, I agree it definitely appears that way, but now for Staz, if he does go for Face Stalker hero power, I think FroStee is pretty happy, given how strong Explosive Trap is in the matchup. He could trade away his 2 bigger minions, go face with the last one, and the development continues then.
It's true. He could just go Satyr Overseer Twin Slice hero power after the 2 minions straight in. This is probably the dream scenario. So FroStee might take 5 damage in the process, but he's nowhere near dying as it stands. Could put the clock on Staz. Yeah, I really like that play. Oh. Giving away his 4/3 and stuff. Okay, so this says that he doesn't want to take any face damage. So he's essentially giving up 4 damage to Staz's face to heal his own face and also give up his 4/1. I'm not entirely sold on it, but I understand the reasoning.
I'm pretty sure I prefer this line. The extra damage that you're taking here, FroStee's hand needs a little bit more time to get all the cards down, and if he's having to use them all defensively, then I feel like the game just ends way too quickly here. He's got to try and bait Staz, or force Staz, I suppose you could say, into using his removal on minions instead of going face, which has happened here.
But if you're forcing him into using removal on minions, wouldn't it be better to have a 4/1 on board? It's tough to say, because if I just changed my thinking to FroStee's health down to 13, then I kind of see your reasoning more and more.
Because even though
there's huge
more pressure on board that you need to remove, you can just, I think, win the race there with the extra 5 damage that you get by FroStee attacking into the Face Stalker. It's very close, though, I agree.
But awkward for him here, because the only way to remove this 2/1 with using neither his health points or his board is I-Beam. But if you play I-Beam, then the Warglaves and the Glavebound are not active this turn. I think maybe you actually just leave it up.
He could, of course, go Twin Slice face and then Glavebound it down, but I agree. I'm just going through the ideas. It's more important to get this damage to face at this point, because he likely just wants to trade with the 2/1 anyway to get the damage. Yeah.
I love it. This is saying to Staz that the race is on. If Staz wants to get the damage of the Death Rattle, then he's giving up the damage of the attack from the Kobold Sandtrooper.
And the real difference maker here for me, which you highlighted, is the I-Beam. Now FroStee has so much more license to start playing the face race.
But I think Staz will get quest completion this turn. Just got to think about lethal options on the other side. I do think that the Kobold is going to trade. I just don't know if it's going into the Glavebound along with, say, the Rapid Fires. Or if it's going into the 2/2s and Staz says, 8 damage is probably too much to ask for on one turn. And then on the next turn, he's got all this burst in hand.
Yeah, if he doesn't trade off anything, he is, I believe, just dying to Metamorphosis, because he knows the second half of the Twin Slice is in hand.
Indeed.
So he's got to trade something. I agree.
the process from Staz is very clear. He knows that his face damage is going to Frosty's face. Just not sure where to trade this Kobold. And I do think I would favor trading into the 2/2, but that could be just some caster vision again. If we're thinking about 8 damage possibilities on 6 mana, oh, even the kill command.
The kill command just seems kind of wrong to me. He could have got double rapid fire down plus a sand trooper instead of wasting an extra damage and getting a worse minion down.
That to me also is very strange. But maybe Staz is thinking that he can play a sand trooper and immediately rapid fire it for 3 damage, and he's already showing a bunch of damage off of these Lepernos. It might be that he's thinking.
That's fair. Yeah,
okay. Hear me out. If FroStee somehow removes his own minions, then Staz can't actually kill these off for Death Rattle. But you know what does? Rapid fire. I agree, it's a bit strange.
Yeah, very strange. But I see your point.
I-Beam locked in the middle, can't be cast for 1 mana, but FroStee's gotta take the healing where he can. But as it stands, he's not showing lethal this turn, or even next, if Staz trades. Could
all
just
face. Does he have any outs for lethal? If he goes all face, Metamorphosis off the top would be short.
I got news for you though. He was just dead, even without this Eagle Horn off the top. Because of the rapid fire being able to clear the other Leopard.
I wish we could have seen it, to be honest, Staz. You let me down. You had a top 5 moment, and you threw it away. But either way, he's going to go for it anyway to close out the game. Wow. A flashy way to end it, but it ends up the same way either way. FroStee explodes, and the aggro face hunter that you and I are a big fan of is still doing pretty well. Dropped a game against the Warlock, but it really was the dream hand that FroStee was able to get with Scrap Him and discarding the Hand of Gul'dan to even stand up against it.
It was quite a spectacle, and you know what? Face Hunter has really changed form throughout the years, back from being the most degenerate deck, the most hated deck on ladder, that if you admit that you like Hunter, you're instantly going to be lynched by half of Twitch chat, to now being off meta, good bring, really heads up, and just a smart lineup choice, I would say. Really like to see it.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very good bring this week. Again, it just does what the Highlander Hunter does by preying on some of the decks without healing, but it just really min-maxes it. It hones in on the part of the deck that's good, which happens to be the face damage, preying on the lack of healing again. And with it out of the way, Staz is left with just his rogue remaining. I think he's just got the very standard build with the secrets thrown in there, the non-Highlander variant, as opposed to FroStee's version, which omits the secrets in favor of Spy Mistress, Sap, and a couple of Frozen Shadow Weavers thrown in there as well. So if I had to hazard a guess, I would say that Staz's list looks like it's in a slightly better position if we are going to head into the mirror. But even having said that, given that game score matters here in terms of tiebreakers, I do fully expect to see Demon Hunter Rogue.
Indeed. So we, again, have to bring up, how does Rogue get there against Demon Hunter, given that they also are not running very much healing anymore without Ziliax? And I think it heavily depends on whether they're able to get things like early Pharaoh Cat to kind of fight back on board, and Backstab, of course, to deal with all of those low health minions. But maybe there is something else going on here. There's an inclusion of Boom Pistol Bully X2 for Staz, which is not something you see very often from Rogue. Probably not going to help him against the Demon Hunter, but maybe if we do head into a Game 5 mirror, that could be a saving grace.
It's a very good point. Be a massive boon in the mirror. Like you said here, most of the battle cry minions for Demon Hunter, you don't really care if you have to take a turn off playing them, because you can just, equip a Warglaives or whatever and hit your opponent in the head very, very happily. Someone who is not very, very happily, though, is FroStee here, with a very, very slow start that is very, very vulnerable to a lot of Rogue's removal.
You can see it from his facial expression that it's not the hand he wanted to see, but if there's anything I learned from playing Demon Hunter, it's that you gotta believe in the top of your deck. And if you're not running the Priestess of Fury version, oftentimes it will deliver. So for Staz here, he's got the Coin Miscreant, available, I do think that's an auto keep. It's just a question of whether he wants the Hanar as well. But even without secrets, you just look at the stat line of Hanar, 2 mana, 1/5. That just seems really strong for the early game.
And speaking of really strong, FroStee's savior has come in the form of a Battle Fiend on 1. That absolutely changes the entire landscape of this matchup now. All of a sudden, FroStee has gone from hero power, miles behind. Staz has the freedom to develop however he wants, to just being able to contest the miscreants when they come down on turn 2 or 3.
That is crazy. That one drop will snowball out of control really soon. And you bring up a lot of the good points, and yet another kind of interaction of being able to play the Battle Fiend is that when Staz coins Miscreant, the Battle Fiend then has an option to, say, damage down the Miscreant or even trade it down along with some additional damage. And once the Battle Fiend is not at 2 health, suddenly it can't be backstabbed or seal faded. And it's just dealing another set of damage because Rogue has to dagger it down.
Job's done.
Fully agree that it's more important to get the Miscreant down and start rocking and rolling with the lackeys instead of the Hanar, which wasn't really doing quite enough quite yet.
Koval lackey is looking insane here, and FroStee has, with this draw, I think a very real decision to make, whether he actually wants to trade down this Miscreant and develop this. I really like this from FroStee.
Me too. I think this is a pretty clear choice. The Satyr Overseer doesn't make a 2/2. It means the Miscreant can't be killed, so you're weak to Witchy Lackey, Goblin Lackey, way too much stuff there. This is the significantly stronger line.
For Staz, with the Kobold Lackey in hand, he can just take the full clear, develop his dagger, and end the turn with a 1/1 on board. Still has another Lackey to trigger his Miscreant next turn if he wants.
Yeah, I'm trying to find any other line. Again, I'm letting Cast Division get to me a little bit here. I can see how powerful Satyr Overseer plus Hero Power is going to be for FroStee on the following turn, but it's just far and away the best thing that Staz can do here.
Even fully seeing the Satyr Overseers, I think that this is just the correct play because if you don't deal with the board right now, then the Overseers are kind of the least of your problems. It's just 2 Battle Fiends going in for another 4 and 3 damage.
Agreed.
But it will be a bit tough for Staz to come back against this next push from FroStee. But one simple backstab off the top could completely change how this turn is going to go. Not quite it. Thinking it's gonna have to be the Witchy plus Miscreant, unless he wants to go for some bluffs with Hanar.
I'm very tempted by the Hanar here. I guess you need to think about what your next turn is going to be, which my first instinct is to say the Shield of Galakron. But maybe that's just too passive and gets eaten up too easily by a Warglaives or something even worse by FroStee.
Yeah, I do think that's very passive. I don't think Staz has the license to do anything that's proactive here. He has to do defensive plays, and I think that the number one method for that is finding lackeys. But then again, this is also just so slow and weak onto the board that he might be thinking his best way back into the game is trying to bluff something like a bamboozle or an ambush, but he does have probably the worst of the 3 secrets available to him right now. So I think I can get behind the Miscreant. But the Warglaives off the top for FroStee.
Nutty Warglaives. This game just goes into overdrive now. The amount of tutus he is summoning. Illegal. He can even set up for the glaive bound next turn and just be in such a good position.
Yikes. So Staz now doesn't even have the mana to go for something like Hanar Dirty Tricks Pray for Explosive Trap. He's only at 5!
Game over, Gia. You just got demon hunted. There is nothing you can do against this.
Is there any 3-drop that does AoE, something he can evolve into? No possibility for Abomination, so I'm not seeing it.
I wonder.
Yeah, Abomination, you can't get up to 7 for a Tunnel Blaster.
You could try and
There's
look
nothing.
for Restless Mummy with the Pharaoh Cat. That would keep him no, not even. Never mind. Maybe alive at 1, I think.
Yeah, that's as good as winning, right?
So many options.
Yeah. The difference that 1 mana could have made here is insane. Just, let's say he had 6 mana and tries to bluff Explosive. I just wonder how that would have panned out, even if you don't exactly get Explosive Trap as Hunter. Does FroStee say, okay, you just win if you have it?
Well,
Hey,
that's a 2
AoE.
damage AoE. Just got to stay alive for 2 turns before it can happen, which we can clearly see is not going to be the case. Lethal represented very handily for FroStee. Hero Power, Glaive-bound Adept, GG, and we are heading to Game 5 for yet another Rogue Mirror, Gia.
Yep, Rogue, yet again, being that last deck for all the players. Maybe we have been giving Rogue too much credit by calling the Zoo or the Face Hunter the 4th deck. Rogue is the 4th deck. Always
I mean,
the one that's
of
last to get the wins.
the power, I definitely agree with you. It's just in terms of bring rate that you have to anticipate that the players had something up their sleeve when so many players, 88% of the players, I believe it was, were bringing this kind of some sort of rogue, be it the Galacrond or the Highlander rogue for for one of the players even. But just overall, it's just looking so weak against the aggressive decks. Demon Hunter, Zoo, regular aggro Hunter, the Warriors, the Druid. It feels like it's just got bad matchups across the board now.
Yeah, and that's why I really want to praise the players that ended up omitting Rogue from their lineup entirely. Yesterday we saw that from Possessi. Not sure if somebody has that type of lineup today, but I really think that's the winning strategy for the weekend. On the bright side, though, if you do have Rogue and your opponent has it, then you get to rely on what potentially ends as a mirror. And this mirror is honestly, I would say, very skill intensive, even though it's got, of course, a lot of Galacrond as being a big factor.
Yeah, if you're both playing perfectly, then it definitely can come down to that in terms of who's able to find the first Galacrond, or if neither player has a response to the other Galacrond. But in the early turns, if you are making any slip-ups, you will find yourself just losing the game by using any key removal pieces or not developing enough tempo, being too greedy. You have to be very careful.
Mm-hmm. The sheer amount of lackeys and cards like Togwaggle into Wondrous Wand and Galacrond itself just creates so much swing potential in this matchup that you can't really rest on your laurels until you have that lethal. For Staz here, going first with the Pharaoh Cat, he's just got a curve. I wouldn't mind keeping the cat and the Miscreant. Ambush is a little suspect, but just as a turn 2 play, I don't hate it either.
I think I actually only want to see the Pharaoh Cat being kept here. Pharaoh Cat you keep just because it's so good on 1, and it gives you options to go on the late turns. It's just a fantastic opening card. For the other cards, Miscreant, it's fairly unlikely to be activated anytime soon, and I would rather look for the Galacrond cards, finding the power cards, Togwaggle, Invokes, probably not Kronks, but basically just, the actual win you the game cards, whereas I don't think Ambush is that.
Staz taking a different route altogether by throwing the Miscreant and keeping Ambush. Maybe hoping to... Oh my god, another Colossus!
If you think it's bad at 10 mana, just wait till you see it at 12 mana later on in this game.
And then it's 0 mana after it gets schemed into the deck and then drawn by Galacrond.
You know what, Gia? I think that's more likely than not to happen.
Alright, the Praise Galacrond off the top is huge for FroStee. Lets him take a VT. But he will be a little scared of Bamboozle, but most of the time people are running... Oh, actually, Staz's list is 1 Ambush, 1 Bamboozle, 2 Dirty Tricks. FroStee now knows that it's not Dirty Tricks.
He can just test for both here. With the spell and the minion, he's just very happily clearing them both off.
Ooh.
Well, that looks like a turn to me.
Mm-hmm. Given Staz's curve, I feel like it's fine just to play Edwin as a 4-4 here. Feels a little bad to have to trade a 2-3 into a 2-1, which can then immediately be daggered down. But if FroStee is spending 2 mana on dagger on that turn, I think it's a win for Staz. And take it slower though.
Yeah, this does of course play around the Seal Fate to the best of the ability, because it means it can't be taken out by dagger or Seal Fate on the following turn, and he still is likely to be able to go for a decent Edwin on the following turn.
Sure. FroStee can coin out his Miscreant if he wants to, but it's a bit punished if he doesn't get Kobold Lackey, because then the 2/2 just immediately kills the Miscreant. The other option is coin Devoted Maniac, or even something slower like the Spy Mistress and Dagger Up.
My initial thought here was, are you allowed to use coin here? How desperately do you want to save it for something later on? And I think the answer is not actually that desperately. You know, Galakron doesn't look that strong yet because you haven't got the invokes. Coin Winged Guardian is good, but if you're omitting so much early game tempo, it's probably not worth holding on to it for that. And therefore, I really like the look of Devoted Maniac here on 3, Spy Mistress plus Miscreant on turn 3, and then just explode with lackeys on turn 5, plus with whatever else you found.
Yeah, if you're able to get that pan out with a bunch of lackeys onto the board, sometimes it's really difficult for the other rogue to respond to because they're not running Fan of Knives. They're not running AoEs, as you can see, that they struggle against Druid.
Weird turn now for Staz, because clearly he wants to set up for Faceless Corruptor on turn 5, and who knows, maybe I'm overcomplicating things. Maybe just the fact that you can go Blackjack plus Edwin sets up for a powerful play onto the board this turn. Their priority for FroStee is going to be to deal with the Edwin, which maybe means the 1/2 sticks around for Faceless.
Yeah, I like this
well.
a lot. It's just unfortunate that the Backstab gets stranded in hand, but the second that Staz draws one of those combo cards, maybe he can come back into this. And again, this is maybe hindsight 2020 for me, but I really tend to keep Miscreant even going first and without having an immediate activator, because there are these 0-cost cards in the deck, and if not those, there are Lackey generators, and then the Lackey plus Miscreant is pretty easy to activate. I feel that
that's very fair.
Without that type of, say, turn 3, turn 4 keep, the deck very often doesn't have anything proactive it wants to do.
So many options.
Well, FroStee's main play, or most obvious play that I'm seeing on this turn, is he could fully clear the board with Draconid, Goblin plus Eviscerate, which denies the Faceless Corruptor, gets him a little bit ahead on board, at least gets a Lackey down.
The problem is that somewhat strands his Miscreant and gets rid of all of his cheap combo effects. So FroStee gonna take that slow turn to get the lackeys, but now Staz has such a powerful play, my goodness.
Yeah, this is completely insane.
Blackjack into the Draconic, transform it, end the turn with 2 4/4s and a 4/3.
And it's not even like it makes his Togwaggle turn more awkward, because he still then gets to go Galakron, Shield of Galakron on 5, Togwaggle plus the Lackey on 7. Just works out beautiful.
We did see from Staz, I think, was it last week, that he took a stranger approach with Togwaggle, that when we thought was the clear Togwaggle turn, he kind of deviated. Of course, this was against Mage, but maybe he's got a different order planned in mind. But I really do like the sound of what you just suggested. Faceless now, Shield later. Even if you float 1 mana, turn 7 would be great.
It's just far and away the strongest thing you can do. Turn before flick, even if you want to get super technical about the answers that FroStee can possibly have. Speak the devil.
As far as answers go, FroStee still got a pretty decent one with double rush lackeys. He can play the Spy Mistress, rush that one out, and kill Edwin. He can eviscerate the other one. But then that leaves him with 1 mana to do nothing with the rest of the turn.
And this is the downside of FroStee's play on the previous turn. By playing so, avariciously and trying to hold on to all the value, build up for these power turns, he's instead been stranded with a lot of stuff in hand. And to be fair, maybe I'm being overly negative. He can clear off a fair bit of the board this turn by rushing the Spy Mistress with an Eviscerate as well.
Yeah, I do think he's just going to have to bite the bullet and either end the turn with a 1/3 and a 1/1, or 2 rush lackeys, and probably the second rush lackey is way more valuable than the taunt. So, all things considered, this isn't too bad. Still got a lot of value in hand. He's got Flick if he wants it next turn. Goes into his choice of powerful turn 7s.
Right, this could be much worse for FroStee. He has the follow-up, which is the important thing, because this is how it so often goes in the rogue matchups. You're going back and forth, back and forth. Neither player gets an especially big advantage, and then whoever has the ability to keep going with the card draw of Togwaggle or Galakron comes in the lead.
Look at the draw for Staz. That smooths out this turn because obviously he wouldn't want to play the lackey that comes off of this shield of Galakron. He gets to spend all of his mana. The greatest feeling in Hearthstone. I think buffing the shield here makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, there's the argument to be made that you could just throw down the Kobold Lackey because it's unlikely to die, but I don't really see how much benefit that actually affords you right now because you can clear off the board anyway.
Yeah, the benefit of playing Kobold Lackey, for example, is that if Staz wants, he could backstab and then just clear the whole board without using his 4-3, which can then go face. But I think the cost is too high by preventing an on-curve Lackey plus Tog on turn 7. Like this a lot. Complete the respect for Faceless Corruptor.
Yeah, all the important check marks were ticked there by Staz. Clearing the board, setting up for Togwaggle, and denying his opponent's Togwaggle, which is of course the big part of that turn.
You can draw for FroStee here now. He doesn't have to spend the whole turn just playing Flick onto a 5-5, which kills his own shield and lines up poorly against the Faceless. He can instead freeze Faceless, rush the Frozen, and develop his dagger. We'll get the bad news that Staz is going to be going into overdrive real soon. Even evolve this Faceless.
That's what I'm thinking, Gia. That is an insanely powerful play. Even with the step, if we wanted to get a 6-drop and then a 7-drop off of Togwaggle.
I think whether he evolves again is dependent on this first result, so I'd like to see him start with the evolve on the Faceless and then go from there.
Yeah, I was going to say the argument is that you maybe want to kill off the Lackey to prevent Togwaggle, but you have the backstab for that even if you want to. So this is just far and away the best line, especially when you're hitting the high main. Oh my god.
That is premium.
Whew.
I love the respect from Staz here. Goes for the backstab, denies Tog, and even Faceless as possible answers. And he gets Tog in the best possible situation, ahead on board, not short on card value, and just, you know, attacking from all fronts.
And FroStee has to just know here that the Winged Guardian is so likely to not be good enough, even though the way you look at it, it's fairly well statted at the moment. The dagger and the 1/1, it's unable to clear off the reborn part of it very easily. But with a wand in hand, Staz is almost certainly going to find an answer, and therefore FroStee needs to find something more impressive.
Agreed. Even if it's not the one, there's still another Lackey left unaccounted for, and those can very easily clear up the second half of the Winged Guardian. So it looks like it's gonna be Galakron and a prayer for FroStee, but one Kronks could change the tide of this match. Or not. Okay. Okay, it's worth mentioning that he did have the dagger open, so he could clear off one Lackey, which makes the Winged Guardian exponentially harder to get rid of.
Yeah, it is pretty much just the Kobold Lackey that is the disaster outcome for FroStee. Although, actually, having said that, Rush Lackey would also be really bad because he could then rush one of the 2/2 hyenas that come off after. FroStee knows, however, that this is not a dream outcome, no matter what he does here. And when they hit the Blackjack for the perfect outcome, it is the disaster outcome for FroStee.
You know, in most situations, I'd say that was a pretty low value one, but you know what? It is exactly well positioned against FroStee here, and I think that is just the game. Aside from just a miracle Galakron into exactly Kronks plus something else.
Yep. FroStee's hand was just too clunky. Staz was ahead right from the get-go. As soon as he made that play of going for the... Wow. Okay, of going for the double Faceless Corrupt. There was just nothing.
I didn't even spot that the end of the turn for Staz, because he had so much mana left, could be just the one for refill in case something like Galakron Kronks comes down this turn. Staz has just got the game covered from all ends.
That, I believe, does not put him up for full invokes, so yeah, you hold off on it for the moment.
That is GG.
Nightmare end there for FroStee, even turning into Galacron to the Nightmare to perfectly bookend it, but well played there by Staz. I think that last game in particular was just very, very nicely done. Even though we disagreed on the mulligan a little bit, it worked out very well for him because his game plan became pretty clear. Just kind of stay ahead for the entire course of the game. Even with lackeys flying everywhere from FroStee, he was still just the player consistently in the lead and dictating the trades. It was a very good display of how you play the Rogue Mirror.
Yeah, and you can really pinpoint the moments that the game shifted tides, because at the beginning there we saw Staz had not much to do outside of just a mediocre-sized end win, whereas FroStee had Ferrocat, lackey after lackey, and so on. But just the difference one Faceless Corruptor could make, or I suppose I should say two, because it is a package deal if you are a good gamer. And yeah, that from that point, FroStee was just falling behind and didn't quite have enough answers, and Staz's curve came together ultimately with the Tog for that Blackjack stunner.
Yeah, taking a look at the schedule though, we can, getting another look at FroStee's score, we can see quite how devastating that was for him. He's now lost to Staz, and he's also lost to one of the players that we are going to be seeing up in the next game, Blitzchung, which means FroStee is 0-2 in Division B. If things don't turn around for him rapidly, he's just out of GM. It breaks my heart to say it. I've got a lot of respect for FroStee as a person and a Hearthstone player, but in the end, it looks like he is the prime contender at the moment for relegation.
Scary for him and for Chonsu, who's also 0-2 as of his loss to Glory today, and yesterday having lost to Flurry. And that, I think, is one of the faces I really did not expect to see down at the bottom. But of course, this is just the first two matches. There are 4 weeks of round robin, guys, and each player will be having a total of 7 matches across the weekend. So there's still chances to turn it around. And I've seen greater comebacks before.
We have indeed. FroStee's mental attitude, I think, very much leans itself to being able to come back from a bad situation like this, where he is still staying cool, calm, and collected, giving it his all week after week, and he realizes it's not important. It doesn't befit you or behoove you to get flustered and upset with loss after loss. It's instead more important to keep a good headspace, trying to go into the next few weeks and take the wins to turn things around. But that's enough about FroStee right now, Gia. We are moving on to our next game of the day. It is again going to be Blitzchung, who we saw take down FroStee yesterday up